Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of the Hill and Brothers podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. I want to welcome everybody to our podcast. We're calling it from this point on, it's time to deal with the pain.
It's time to deal with the pain. It has been
Yeah.
time. There's too much pain happening. Unfortunately, if you're a black person, that's all we know is pain. I once heard you say we eat pain like Skittles. Um, you did say that is a Sam quote from about 10 years ago. Um, But unfortunately, we have grown so used to pain that a lot of us don't know a life without it. And that's something that we will be addressing on this podcast as we move forward.
Yeah. Um, you know, on Sundays, I spend time watching some of probably one of the few times during the week I watch the more national news and, all the little commentators and all the little reporters and their little panels and things. And, you know, um, it's always interesting listening to the version of, what the greater uh, America is looking at and find important. Um, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we know that yesterday was Martin Luther King's birthday. Tomorrow is, when we nationally observe Martin Luther King's birthday. And one of the interviews, and I wish I wrote down the name, but one of the advisors that was with him when he was alive, they interviewed him, right? And it was, they every year they interview this gentleman, and they always want to ask him, what do you think Martin Luther King would think about what's going on today in the community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And his answer was interesting. Um, really kind of, you know, talked about, what's going on now, the struggle that's continuing. And, he mentioned that, uh, Black lives always mattered, right? That was what the struggle was about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is just that other folks wasn't treating it, treating us like our lives matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he also talked about, he said, he almost uh, uh, jumped out the chair and, started talking about current leadership and how current leadership is missing the boat. And since when we don't need no police. I mean, he just I thought the gentleman was gonna have a conniption fit. He was so upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
um and then he really doubled down. He says, yeah, we got to believe Black Lives Matter, but when are we going to deal with the carnage going on in your own community?
Mm.
I, he says, how can you call yourself activists and leaders and you ain't addressing that in a
Right.
real way? And I mean, he was livid.
Yeah,
you
I would
know,
agree.
yeah, yeah, because it's always like I always say, it's a both and, right? We don't have the luxury of only focusing on one side of that conversation. We
Right.
just don't, right? And he says, I don't take it for granted that we need to deal with the way America polices us, you know, and there's some people who would probably disagree with him and whatever when he says, all police officers are not bad people, and now you got, it's like individuals and you got the issue about policing in general. But he
Mm-hmm.
spent more time talking about how do men, black men and black leaders, so you get a little bit of that sexist stuff in there, as we have a tendency to do sometime. Well, not just sometime. being leaders of your community, and you can allow this kind of stuff to happen in your community. And he literally called it carnage, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that, right? And I was hoping that, and they didn't do this, and I think I know why they didn't do it, right? Because at the one particular show that I watched, that's actually the person who is the moderator is black. Um, that uh showed the interview, or did the interview with him. Wanted to see if they were bold enough to have that their ending panel, you know uh address what he said, and they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Why you think they didn't? Why you think they did? I got my belief why I think they didn't, but why you think they did?
Well, I see this all over, not just national, but even locally. No one wants to address it because it's going to point out that black folks have problems, and that and there needs to be some accountability within our community because the violence is out of control. So
Right.
no one wants to have that conversation because it's an uncomfortable conversation that almost counters some of the narratives that we've heard over the last few years. So it's hard to preach Black Lives Matter in a city like Milwaukee where you have 200 murders, or Philadelphia, or Chicago, or even here in the Twin Cities when you have over and over and over violence is through the roof, and literally over 85% to 90% of the time, actually it's even a little higher than that in some areas, it's black folks. That makes the narrative very challenging over the last couple of years. It's hard to admit those things when we have some realities that we have to face within our community. And so no one on national TV is gonna go out and just say that. We're gonna continue to only point in one direction. And granted, yes, racism, white supremacy has been a huge barrier and continues to be a huge barrier for us moving forward. But at the same time, there are some things that we have done internally that white supremacy might have kicked it off, but it's up to us to make sure that we change that. And I feel like that narrative does not get caught on television too often, or when it does, then the person's called out to be a coon or something like that. So,
Well, yeah, yeah. And so it brings up a couple different things for me. Is how our, that T word, how our traumas show up,
mm-hmm,
right? And when we talk about the violence and the carnage, we know that that's one way, in a major way, that our trauma of dealing with, as you say, white supremacy, oppression,
mm-hmm,
and the years of that, and really ignoring how has it really affected us emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically, which, by admitting to that, brings us closer to allows us to really display our humanity as human beings. When you are treated as less than for over 300 years, 400 years, there's got to be some kind of repercussions emotionally, spiritually, and
right,
psychologically, right? And it's like admitting to that, it gives you a chance to really address it and
right,
be clearer on addressing it. And I think that's the piece. And the other piece is that the fight that we are in currently, we're still using tools from the past to fight that.
yeah,
Okay.
70 and 80-year-old tools, yes,
Right. And even at the end, even Martin Luther King was questioning some of the
those tools.
outcomes from using those tools. Not that he
Mm-hmm,
was going to stop being nonviolent. That wasn't going to happen. It was
right,
bigger than that, right? Um, um, because it became clearer to him the closer he started going north, the response of the black community to
yeah,
to him, and the response that folks had in terms of his response to the war. You can't be going up against the great white man who signed the legislation.
mm-hmm,
You can't talk about his war. You got to watch, and that was his own people,
mm-hmm,
right?
yeah,
So And so the thing comes down to this is, why can't we have a conversation about that? The both and. That's my thing. You know, if I agree or disagree, there is a larger conversation internally we need to have. And then you got the other piece, we don't want to have those conversations out loud, right?
Right.
Even though people are having these conversations about us and amongst each other all the time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because when we do have the conversation, it appears that we are, that not we, but some members in our community are justifying some of this crazy behavior that we have
Mm-hmm.
been seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true, right? um and so it is hard, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to have an honest conversation about the internal strife that might be happening within our communities, because it's a overwhelming challenge, right? It's been an overwhelming challenge for a long time, and you can't ignore stuff away, right? And the more you try to ignore stuff away, the worse it gets. It's like having a disease. I got a stomach ache. I don't want to deal with it. I'm always, take some Pepto Bismol for 4 or 5 years, and then I get to a point where it can't handle it no more. Now I got to go to the doctor. Now I can't fix it.
Mm.
I think it feels like that right now for us.
Right.
Okay. Um, because sometimes it feels like that for me.
Got
Let
it.
me just be straight, right? Because so much stuff has to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when there individuals in the community start talking about, yeah, when they do admit to the violence in the community, right? Then they go to the other piece that we have done a lot of, but what about jobs, what about housing, and all these other kind of things that go along with that, as a result of that, right? But when you are close to the ground, or know people close to the ground, right? A lot of this is a trauma response, right? When I say trauma response, not that things like housing and jobs and stuff might not have a piece to that.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the long, in at least if not right now initially, and for some folks right now, but the violent part of it is an emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we have a long history of folks trying to deal with uh, poverty in our community, trying to deal with housing in our community, and not being violent to each other.
Right.
We have a history of that, right? So my emotional response to my relationship to you, somebody who looks like me, is a trauma response.
Right.
And if we are refusing to deal directly and have some real hardcore pieces about that trauma, and then acknowledging trauma is, the trauma response might be normal, right?
Right.
We done normalize this stuff,
Right.
right? And
Sadly.
and,
Yeah.
and you cannot ignore normalize a destructive behavior and not think it's going to hurt everybody,
Right.
right? And we also have a long history of being conditioned not to talk down or bad to each other, because we have a system that does that regularly, right? I mean, even this morning, we got folks who've been pushing racist uh, 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 rhetoric, policies in like in different states like Virginia or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and want to quote Martin Luther King at the same time.
Yeah.
And then they was interviewing this one guy, because the Voting Rights Act, they have to renew it, right? This the idea that you have to renew an act and not make it law is a problem in itself.
Right.
That's another indirect way. It says, well, it wasn't that important.
Right.
When you got to renew something every time, I don't see them renewing the original Constitution, because if they did, they'd make some changes, because the original Constitution did include women and people of color
Right.
to start with.
Right. I'm about to make a switch real quick. Keep going.
You know, and then the gentleman who talked about um, who the gentleman who talked about renewing it, he voted for it originally 10 years ago, right?
Right.
And you know what he said? Well, I don't know. We had a black president and we got a black vice president. I don't know what the big deal is. We can't hear you. So, um, oh man, so it's going to just be nauseating over the next few days, especially the days when you're going to get all these racist individuals who going to quote Martin Luther King, and actually deal with people. The one they always want to deal with is that part around the judge somebody on the content of
the character.
Yeah, their character, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what if you're just a character?
That's one thing, but also if we talk about content of character, if we're gonna really judge people off of that, then again, accountability has to come up,
right?
Because the character within our own community over the last, I would just say, 25 years, when it comes to young males, it's been very violent. Not all of them, but a significant amount, and we're not honestly addressing that. And then we get mad when political officials and city councils and stuff attempt to do things as far as trying to reduce the violence, or they have strategies to reduce the violence. Then the community gets upset. But again, we need to be a lot more accountable amongst ourselves within our community. And I think what's going to happen, and you're right, it's going to be extremely nauseating over the next week. Honestly, it might even trail off until Black History Month, to be honest, is we're going to continue to see people utilizing King for their own their own not narratives, but their own plights, right? They're going to grift off of King's message after so much time that he's been gone. And that just happens every year till Black History Month rolls in and something goes on. But we got major problems going on. The dream that King talked about is no longer in effect. This is a whole different space and place that we're in. But we can leverage off of what he was talking about, and we can craft a new dream, but there has to be accountability on both ends. We can't just talk about the system without taking some of our own actions as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the interesting thing, about that is you're that whole, yeah, God, it is so much. It is so much, right? That we can talk about around that. But when you start talking about accountability, the downside when you start talking about accountability is even within the community, sometimes there's no room for compassion.
Right. accountability honestly could be uh it can be replaced with the word healing, but even that goes in a different direction. But honestly, that's what we're getting at. And you're right, there is no compassion, because what ultimately starts happening, which is our trauma response, as you talked about earlier, is we just turn on one another, and we do it. It might not be with the guns that's happening in the streets, but it might be in these organizations and in these rooms, and people are politically gangbanging amongst one another, and we see that happen all the time. And it's something about us and our trauma and our experience that doesn't allow us to effectively work together. I think we have too many different agendas and missions, and we're not all headed towards the same direction. And since that, what ends up happening is we just start infighting, and then people see that, and then they benefit off of our confusion and disconnection, and then they do whatever they want. They fulfill their own agendas based on what we're not doing well, and that's part of our issue. We do not need to all be on the same side of everything. I think that's one of the struggles we have. We talk about trauma responses as a community, is we feel like we all need to think the same in order for progress to happen. And if we're waiting to get to that place for us all to think the same, then we're in a bad situation. And then when we don't think the same, this is where that non-compassion comes in that you were talking about. You can have one different thought, and it turns into a huge argument, which I think is very dysfunctional.
Yeah, and part of that is the all or nothing response, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
the nothing is to do nothing or
Right.
act like it doesn't exist. And but again, we have to really dig into how we function as long as we have in this country, especially African Americans with slavery in their background. And I always got to make that clear,
Yeah.
because when I deal with some of my African American colleagues who are like second generation immigrants, even third generation immigrants, right?
Hmm.
They're experiencing this oppression, and have a lot of anger and want to fight the system, and absolutely we should not give up that fight. But the psychological and emotional effects of trying to fit into a country that really didn't leave room for you to fit in,
Hmm.
right? And trying to sort that out, right? The whole idea that, okay, what I'm seeing my white counterparts doing, I try to do the same thing, take care of my family, get a job, keep a job, and all these other kind of things that we try to emulate, and it's still not good enough.
Mm.
So I can understand the response. What should I do? Right? And right now, we're probably experiencing that at a great deal amongst our young people. Okay, doing it the right way. There's no guarantee you're going to get everything you think you deserve,
Right.
right? And just taking whatever I want or doing whatever I want right now, whatever feels good in the moment, what we call that survival stress management, is a whole lot more fun,
Hmm.
and it's a lot more stimulating, especially when I'm already dealing from a depressed level, emotionally depressed level, right?
Hmm.
And then both inside and outside my community, I get this impression that my outcome for many of us, our future is not bright. Our
Right.
future there's a and so let's go on and get to that future. you know and then again, the accountability without compassion, the system, like they've got this big argument on sentences right now, making adjustments on sentencing, right? Oh man, folks
Hmm.
lost their mind on that, right? They lost their damn mind, right? Oh no, you cannot change sentencing, but they got all the research and statistics to say sentencing, the way they've been doing it, did not change outcomes, right?
Hmm.
All you did was uh um uh, gave people more time, but you're not going to keep them.
Hmm.
We're going to keep them longer. Okay, but you're still going to let them out. right? Now and so how are they gonna come out? And then when they come out, what are you gonna do to support them so they don't have to go back in and so they don't terrorize you? So accountability without compassion from either end is not beneficial in the long run. And our responses to things are always in the immediate. And America's used to doing that. That's why we're behind in many different areas worldwide in terms of development, is that short window. What can I do right now to either get the middle with the middle of the road vote, and we can say the middle class, the white middle class, to vote for us every 2 years, right? People think about every 4 years, but it's really every 2 years when that's where the rubber meets the road, especially when we're talking about the Congress and the Senate, right? The folks who really put legislation up front. Okay. And so the thing is I'm not opposed to folks going to prison. What I'm opposed to is what you're going to do when you do it. And what I'm opposed to, and it's the same thing I'm opposed to in the community. If I'm going to do community programming, how do I do more than make a person feel like, well, I understand why you might have done that and all that. But at the same time, how do I stop doing that? And how do I understand why I'm doing it? Right? Because people always want to say they know better, they know this, they know that. But yeah, that might be true. But when you are not understanding how you are reacting to your environment or being triggered by your environment, right, and how that works emotionally, you can have the best plans in the world and have the person end up doing something that's not in their best interest in the long run and not in the best interest of the community in the short run and long, right? And so again, you can't have a one-sided conversation. You can't have a poor me conversation and think you're gonna progress. Just recently, and I think I mentioned this possibly last week, where we did the radio show on this same topic. 2022, what are some of the things that we might need to look at as a community? We still trying to deal with COVID, right? Yep. And we're still trying to deal with violence in the community, right? We still got to deal with the uprise of ignorance around race. Okay, it's like you don't want to have an honest conversation about the experience of Black people because you worried about it gonna make your children feel bad. Which basically say, I don't give a damn if you feel bad or being treated bad, right?
We're gonna ignore this, yeah.
Or we're just gonna ignore this, even though we're still working from that same foundation.
Right.
Right. And see, the problem is that people in power positions benefit from ignorance. And there's enough ignorance going around all around to have folks just accept craziness, right? And the white senator talking about, well, I don't know what the big deal is on the Voting Rights Act, and there's nothing wrong because you had a Black president and we got a Black vice president, so it can't be wrong. But but the thing is, let's talk about after we got the Black president, some folks in our community lost their minds, and the other folks just got complacent, and we ended up with Trump.
When you say lost their minds, what do you mean? How did they lose their minds?
They lost their minds. Like, how could you let this Black man be president? Man, they did a documentary on after Obama won presidency. You had good old boys in tears. We're talking about grown ass men who would not let their own children cry in tears because their president was black.
Wow.
What do you think that whole statement about the get America back or all that other kind of stuff going on was all about? And the only and then the folks talk about Trump or whatever, and we got Trump, but the thing is there's enough blame to go around on how we got Trump, right? And when we talk about the Republican Party, and we can talk about the Democratic Party as well, okay. When we talk about the Republican Party, all Trump took is everything that a lot of other Republicans did over the years, and he put them all under one umbrella and did it all together. You're going to lose your country. Lose your country, you mean the one you stole? You're going to lose your country to them people. So people talk. So we got this delusional idea of what America is, and we need to hold on to this delusion because we can't handle the truth. Right? And then you got the other half of America trying to prove they ain't racist and doing all kind of stupid stuff.
What stupid stuff are they doing, Sam? Huh? You can't say they're doing stupid stuff, Sam. They're because they're being anti-racist. They're doing the work. They read Robin DiAngelo. They've been with Resma. They read Abraham Kennedy. They're doing the work, Sam. They're not doing stupid stuff. You can't say that.
So they know how to read
and breathe. You need to cut it out, Sam.
Well, but no, I mean, when I'm in meetings with some groups and organizations, there are a lot of good people. I would say there are good people in there. Is that whole thing about even when you listen to Trump, it was good people on both sides. But there's good people everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But they're just as stuck as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
So how do I be anti-racist and all this other kind of stuff? And we're gonna focus on that, but we still are scared to go up against our bosses. Just keep it real.
Yeah,
I don't care. I mean, if you're scared to go up against your boss, just say you're scared to go up against your boss. That's all. It's like I'm even tired of doing my own trainings.
It's gotten that bad, huh?
But man, you do the training, they bring you in. Oh, Sam, I heard you're such a great speaker, and I hear nothing but great things about you. Can we get you to come in and talk to our group and do that piece on historical trauma in the Black community and how much it costs? Now at least now when they say how much it costs and I give them a number, they don't get to choking like they used to. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't worth it. I was great, but I wasn't worth it. Right? When you're giving your little white counterpart consultant all kind of money, right? And I don't even charge you probably even close to half of what you've been charged. That I know you paid somebody else to do some of that anti-racist stuff, to talk about white supremacy and man, go in, do the training, hear nothing else.
Yeah.
And because I've been around for 30 years, I'm going back to these same places, right?
Yeah.
And you're still dealing with the same damn struggle you was dealing with when you brought me in the first time.
And that is the piece that is the sticking point. Is this just a dog and pony show to check a box and say we did it, or are we really trying to do some work? And that I think that's where a lot of the work that I've done around the DEI pieces have been different than some of our colleagues. Is really just trying to see people have organizations or programs and departments develop a culture that they want to be different within their organization department. It's not just a mindset shift. That's a piece of the puzzle. But if you really want the inclusion that you say you want, you got to be about it 24/7. You have to change the culture of what you're doing.
And you got to be, you not only do you got to be, you got to do it 24 hours, and all you got to do is follow the money. What kind of investment they putting in, right?
Yeah.
Their biggest investment is bringing some cultural advisor in. Most of their money go to cultural advisor, and that's as far as it goes, right? You're not spending the money to revamp, making your policies more compassionate accountability kind of cultural framework, right? You're not willing to be brave enough to say this is uncomfortable, but it needs to be done, right? And it's not being done by leadership. They always want to send all their little staff people to the training, but the leaders don't come themselves.
Don't show up. Yeah. Yes.
And then if they do show up, right? Then if they get offended, it's all shut down, right? And then white ends up being right. So how do you fight that battle? And I understand as Black people, we want to fight that battle of white supremacy and that kind of stuff. But again, we don't have the luxury of only doing one thing at a time. And we seem to, so we not only do if we fight that battle, but we really need to fight that battle that's close to home. I think that we will get more bang for our buck of fighting that battle close to home, but that's the most difficult, emotionally difficult battle to fight, right? The most difficult, because it's hard to say, look, I have to, in terms of being right, I have to hold you accountable,
right?
But what I hope to do differently than the system is show you some compassion, show you a way out, right? Show you a better path, not just punish you. Because again, we do that same kind of stuff in the community. When the community gets tired of your Black behind, they will turn on you almost as worse than the folks you're dealing with. I hear it all the time. Right? I'll deal with an organization, and then all of a sudden you'll hear, "Oh, Mr. Simmons, some of our Black staff is pretty hard on our clients."
Wow. Why do you think that is? Why are we harder? Because I've heard that too with even like Black police officers. People say Black police officers are even harder on people, on citizens, civilians than white police
because
officers.
They're embarrassed by the behavior. They make it personal. They make it personal.
Interesting.
Because they make it personal, and what we won't admit to is we're as conservative or more conservative than some of the damn white folks we deal with.
I think I'm pretty conservative.
What?
I said I can admit it. I'm a little conservative, just a little bit. I'm like center right at this point in time.
I mean, I don't give a darn about any of the titles. All I'm talking about is when we talk about being judgmental of each other.
Yeah,
and some people are listening. Well, Mr. Simmons, you're being judgmental. No. I am. You can call it what you want.
Yeah.
Right. But I know, and see, and that's the benefit of doing the work. I know that when I do, I had my clients who are in programs, who've been in multiple programs, who will say, now for me to be the honorary Black man that some people think I am, who will say, you are think about this. Once they figure out what trauma is, because a lot of us don't even know what trauma is because we've been living it so well. We just think it's normal. We just thinking that's being Black. Okay.
Fish and water.
Once they figure out what trauma is, and figure out what compassion looks like, right? Because all I do is try to educate them about what's going on with them. I'm not necessarily telling them what to do or not to do fully, right? Because you got to lead people. You got to lead people with some feeling of empowerment, even if they're doing wrong shit. You got to leave them with some empowerment pieces, right?
Absolutely.
And out of clear blue, I've had clients say to me, and I've learned stuff from clients because out of clear blue, they when they get it, they tell you.
Yeah.
Right. I've had men tell me, Mr. Simmons, you're the first person a first elder who treated me like I wasn't stupid.
Wow. I think about that. What they're saying there, without necessarily saying it, is you had enough dignity to actually teach me something, talk to me, engage with me from a level that did not make me feel any shame,
Right,
guilt, blame, discouragement. Like almost like you heard me. And this is this, and I've had those moments myself, both in a counseling standpoint and outside of a therapy room, is actually engaging with folks just from them being human, even knowing, yeah, they may have been on probation, they may have made mistakes. Hell, they may have just robbed somebody, or they might have
right,
finessed us out of something,
right,
but still understanding why they are doing those things
right,
is number one. And many of us don't understand why. We
right,
just blame and judge them, and then we throw them to the side. And then when those people get caught up in situations like a George Floyd or Philando Castile, then we want to take those folks and we want to put them on pedestals. But in everyday life, we don't we don't engage each other very well. And I've said this before. Most people that I know that have been out here campaigning hard would never have talked to George Floyd. They would have
right,
never talked to him. And it's like we got George Floyd's all over the place. I mean, they ain't dead, but we got them type of folks who are out here struggling
right.
every day. And many of us who we call community leaders and folks doing the work are not engaging these folks from a level where they respond like this person responded to you. And that's a huge problem that we have to overcome.
And the piece is okay, you did this and this and this, right? And that behavior you did don't make a lot. It makes sense, but it don't.
Right.
And this is why.
Right.
Okay. Now you say your goal is to be a better father, right? But you're steadily going to jail. Talking about you got to do what you got to do to take care of your kids. And what do you think your kids would say about that? Or what would you had said about that when your father had to go to prison? Would you rather have him go to prison or do what he did to go to prison? Which one?
Right. Right.
Right? Let's think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Or have it, and now I'm doing women's groups and have the women tell you, because I just started that back up this year, and because I hadn't dealt with them for a couple months or so. And I come in and they all showed up. I mean, the room was full. We're talking about Zoom because people still trying to figure out how you get all these people to show up for Zoom, because I say stuff they want to hear.
Yeah.
Or they don't want to miss, because like they say, you never know what Mr. Simmons might say. Mr. Simmons might say something out to lunch, but it might sound like it's out to lunch, but it make a whole lot of sense. But when you get a black woman, which was and I again one of them things, I think because it shook me in such an emotional way, I have to keep emphasizing this. When one of the black women said, Mr. Simmons, before we stop group, for the end of the last group we had in the year, she says, I got to tell you something. She says, I love doing group with you. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us have talked about this. Now they're having conversation. I remember they're all meeting on Zoom and stuff, and they done found a way to have conversation with each other, right? Mm-hmm. You are the first black man who have treated me like I wasn't stupid.
Wow. Wow.
And she said, even when we wrong, you don't treat us like we're ignorant.
Right. Right. Because it's not about judgment.
And you had a little smart one in the background. And yes, he does. He tell me when I'm wrong. Well, little girl, she was out to lunch and she just laughed. Because she was. She knows she was. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a woman of fight in a minute. Right? Big old heart. Mm-hmm. Right? But got her child back.
Right.
When we helped her understand, what is it you really want?
Right.
You want your child back, or you want to be right in the moment? And because the thing is, you can be right and wrong at the same time, but you're having this emotional response and you're acting on your emotions.
Right. No
I'm
logic.
not saying that you ain't right. You weren't right in what you thought you wanted, and you ain't right that social worker probably is gaslighting your ass.
Mm-hmm.
I done swear a lot today. So you supposed to clear me up. Wasn't we
Hey
supposed
man,
to?
it's 2022, man.
Hey man,
Trying to deal with the
wasn't we supposed
pain.
to have
You
wasn't
gotta
I
let it
supposed to have
flow.
the swear jar? Put us some
Oh, I
money.
got it.
You got it. So we might have to start putting some money in that jar so we can start sending my grandkids and your children to start their college fund.
Do you hear it?
Yeah. It's like
Can you hear that?
yeah. I can see it now. I can hear a little bit.
All right.
I can see it
I
now.
might have to turn it up.
They asked them, "How did you get to college?" Oh, Uncle Sam and Grandpa's swear jar. He swore that much, But again, if I didn't see it work,
Yeah.
then I stopped talking about this stuff. Right. Matter of fact, if I didn't see it work, I wouldn't even be working. I got a little bit of money, and I get my little Social Security check that I had to stay alive for to get. Not all of us black men stay alive long enough to get that little check, right?
Yeah, that's true too.
I get enough. I get enough because I pay my bills. I get enough to at least pay my mortgage, and and be able to buy some grits and eggs, and all the other kind of stuff. I get enough to do that, so I could, get old and just do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't do that right now, unfortunately.
Right.
Because now all of a sudden, at least some people are trying to hear me. But in dealing with these organizations, and you tell them about the schools don't want to do the 1619 whatever
1619 project,
yeah,
critical race theory.
right. All that we can say all of that is gaslighting terms to people who don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
America done set it up so people don't read, write, or know arithmetic, and taking full advantage of that. Right?
Yeah.
The hell with the rest of y'all. My kids don't need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically what you're saying, my kids don't need to know the truth because truth ain't good for them, but it's bad for everybody else, and I don't care about nobody else. All or nothing. And so why wouldn't our own kids act the same way? If you seeing that, why wouldn't they act that way? And you're living in an environment that won't hold you accountable, especially if you say, that white teacher did this and this and this, or that white man, that all or nothing response. Or if I learned how to deal with pain, as you said, that you talking about, I said, we eat pain like Skittles. Suffering ain't a big deal.
Right.
How I feel in the moment is a big deal.
Right.
I remember somebody said, well, these poor babies are out here, they steal in the cars because they ain't got no place to sleep. And
that's not why they're still in these cars.
I know
that ain't it. That ain't it.
But and
they're doing donuts in Cubs parking lot, man. That's what they wanna.
But the person meant well.
What?
But we're given and the person meant well. The person who said it meant well, right? Because we always want to come from that victim rhetoric.
Yeah, we definitely got to address the victimhood narrative, man.
Yeah, with that victim rhetoric,
ridiculous.
Thing is the difficulty of fighting the victim rhetoric. There is a piece of truth in there, right? That's how you can keep yourself from going insane. There's a piece of truth that there is unfairness in our system revolving around race.
Yes,
absolutely. Right.
But then there's more to the story. It doesn't stop there.
Yeah, and much more to the story.
Right.
Right. And it's a new story. And see, part of our story changed. Right. 40 years ago, all of those things, all those black rhetoric and black movements and that kind of stuff, power to the people, we gonna, the things that kind of gradually kind of still held us together blew up 40 years ago. All that stuff about, we was a black community and we looked out for each other. There's a certain amount of that was still around 40 years ago. Right? Black women looking after each other, because that was the strength of our community of black women. I know black men, some of them are just rolling over and they ain't even in their grave yet. Right?
Yep.
While we was out doing and protesting and leading, if that's what we thought we were doing, black women were trying to look out after black women and making excuses for our black asses. Okay? And so the thing is again, that don't mean we wasn't out there doing what we, but some of us out there imitating white men. Imitating white men.
In what ways? Because I think that's going to go over people's heads.
Well, in terms of what we believe our position in the world is. But you're talking about, it was so white supremacy, the head of the house and that kind of stuff, and being strong at all times and that kind of thing. In America, whoever got the power gets to rule and all this other kind of stuff, and the violence, because America was taken with violence.
Yeah.
We've been imitating them. Keep my woman in line and all this other kind of stuff. But the thing is that stuff wasn't working for us in terms of when we were really in our survival mode early in this process of America, trying to work together, but at the same time, being angry at the wrong person, right? Taking that anger out on each other, relational wise, and thinking that wasn't going to affect children. I'm one of the probably maybe another generation, but of the generation who grew up believing the abuse that I was taking was for my own good. Believing that. And so the thing is we can talk all about the obvious trauma of our society that didn't include us, but what about that internal trauma? We how do we deal with the community trauma that we do to each other? We have no dialogue for that.
Yeah,
that's where we raise our kids in.
Yep.
And so the thing is 40 years ago, the last devastating hit that our community took, okay, after the last riots, 68, 69?
Yeah.
When young people said, I'm tired of waiting. Now we burning down shit. Some of them places from 69 and 68 didn't even recover.
Yeah.
Then we did it again in 1990. Some of them places still ain't recovered. And the ones that recovered, white folks done moved in. And then we do it again.
2020.
And who's moving in?
Everybody.
Right.
It's wholesale. Right. Come on in.
And so the thing is, I'm not saying that, but we gotta quit doing that reactionary stuff. And I'm not saying when folks was out there marching for real,
right,
wasn't right. It needed to happen. But the longer we disregard that other side of our response and emotional response, it will always curtail the progress we need to make. You can be right and wrong at the same time. I tell my clients that all the time. Your anger is legitimate. How you deal with that anger might be destructive. And so what's the moral to the story? We've got a couple minutes. I don't know, but we got to figure out a way to get folks to really figure out a way to have this conversation internally, because I think if we can get a handle on our trauma and the effects of our trauma on us and how that affects the relationships we have with each other, a couple things would happen. Even folks who don't like us would have to respect us. I know that's true. Because there's a lot of folks who don't like us or like me who respect me. Remember your professor who sent you to talk to me?
I'm not gonna say his name, but yeah.
No, we ain't gonna say his name.
Yeah, I remember him very well.
He didn't care for me.
No.
But he thought he didn't care for me. I don't think he cared for me as a person because you know I could rub a person the wrong way. But the stuff I was talking about made sense enough for him to send you.
Right.
And that's important. You got to give him that much. Even no matter how he didn't feel about me, he didn't let that get in the way of what he thought he should do for you.
Right. Yep.
And you can do that.
And
I don't need you to love me.
Yeah.
But you damn sure need to respect me, and I can't expect you to respect me when I'm not doing a respectful thing for my damn self.
Exactly. And we always hear that respect is earned. And it's earned in the actions that we do. And the actions that we do for our community, people have no choice but to respect us because we're taking care of the cleaning up. We're not asking for somebody else to fix the little problems that we have. We're actually investing in the future of our children, that they have a damn future. I mean, like, and I've said this on this podcast several times, is I think one of the things that we can all unify on is making sure that our babies have a future. If we can just start there. I mean, a lot of the stuff, if we can just say we want, all babies born in the last 5 years to have health and opportunity, and by 2040 or whatever, we could do that. And we don't need to add in our personal agendas. We don't need to add in our religious and our fraternal and our social club. We don't need to add none of that. We just want to focus, and everybody can do their own version of what they feel is necessary without it being combative. Just like you talked about earlier, it's this all or nothing response, and it's very reactionary. Now think about that. That's probably one of our worst trauma responses as a collective. We have an all or nothing response from a reactionary standpoint with a victim narrative. Now think about that equation. We are being reactionary with all or nothing, and we're staying in this point of just being victims, right? So either you need to do exactly what I say, or you are ultimately controlling and hurting me. I have no personal accountability into nothing. And I'm just responding to stuff that's going on. I'm not taking any proaction. And I don't have any agency. What ultimately happens is you have no personal agency as a collective, and that is harming us. That is harming us, and we have to be able to move beyond that. And I feel like we don't have enough voices or narratives or actions or something to help move this along. But it's very clear to me this is what's happening for us. And honestly, Sam, I think that when people hear us, for some people, it's a breath of fresh air. And then for other people, we're speaking like a whole foreign language, man. They don't understand nothing we're talking about.
Right. Okay.
And that's the scary part for me. But anyway, any final thoughts from you, Sam?
No, I think I can't add no more. And I think maybe next week that will be the title of the show.
Yeah.
The narrative. Changing the narrative.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So this is our last podcast titled Healing Brothers Podcast, as we will be moving the show called It's Time to Deal with the Pain. It is time to deal with the pain podcast as we move forward in 2022. Thank you all for coming. Still subscribe to the YouTube channel. As for right now, it is Healing Brothers Podcast on YouTube. Make sure you share it on all the social media platforms, and we'll see you next Sunday at 3 p.m.